Doctor. Again, we are using the University of Wyoming Family Practice. If you need that number, we'll have it up here. Thank Pastor Sells for joining us from Calvary Chapel in Cheyenne. Today in Wyoming history, on March 4th, 1884, the legislature passed a tax authorization for the purpose of constructing what? A university. Quote for the day: you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. C.S. Lewis. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, March 3, 2021, message number 12. Mr. President, this is to inform you that the House has adopted the temporary House and Joint Rules of the 66th Wyoming State Legislature as the permanent House and Joint Rules of the 66th Wyoming State Legislature General Session. Dispensing with further reading, signed Wendy Harding, House Chief Clerk.
Reports from standing committees.
March 3, 2021. Mr. President, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 110, Small Claims Procedures, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chair. March 3, 2021, Mr. President, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 96, Homicide Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. No, Senator Cooper. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. March 3, 2021, Mr. President, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 101, Pen Registers and the Trap and Trace Devices Authorization, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. March 3, 2021, Mr. President, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 75, Protective Orders Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. March 3, 2021, Mr. President, committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 119, Investment of State Permanent Funds, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Kinsky, Perkins, and Steinmetz. Senator Perkins, Chairman. March 3, 2021, Mr. President, committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 120, Investment of State Non-Permanent Funds, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Kinsky, Perkins, and Steinmetz. Senator Perkins, Chairman. March 3, 2021, Mr. President, committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 122, Wyoming Agriculture Authority, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Kinsky, Perkins, and Steinmetz. Senator Perkins, Chairman.
Thank you. Bills on second reading. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I have the privilege of the floor?
Please.
Okay, sitting behind you, Mr. President, we have our first group of students of the session visiting us. We have a group led by Mrs. Danny Olson from Chugwater High School joining us. Just made the trip down the interstate here to be with us today. So proud to have folks from Platte County down here. And if they could please stand and be recognized, we'd like to welcome them to the Senate.
Let's welcome these folks from Chugwater. Welcome to Senate. Any further privileges? Bills on second reading. Senate File 4, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 4, Airport Districts.
Senate File 4, there are no amendments. Senate File 4 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 17, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 17, governmental publication requirements.
There is an amendment. Will reading clerk please read in the amendment?
Senate File 17, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 2, delete.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 17 and would ask for your favorable consideration. We had a good discussion yesterday, senators, and I think, as the Corporations Committee worked this bill in the interim, the intent was really looking for some potential cost savings for our county commissions. But as we discussed the bill, my concern was more about public access of information. And so, as I mentioned, I have a father who's in his 80s. He does not look at computers, will not touch a computer, but he still reads the paper. And so I want to recognize the value in making sure that folks that don't want to access information online have the ability to do that through their local newspapers. But I also recognize the value in having that information being provided online. And as we know, some of our local municipalities maybe don't maintain their website as robustly as they should. But I think that's an important shift that needs to happen. And we need to start requiring our local entities to publish some of this information on their websites. So what this amendment does, senators, is it provides for both requirements on our governing bodies. And so I don't want to walk you through the entire amendment, but it really reinserts, the essence of it reinserts all the language that was originally stricken by the Corporations Committee, reinserts that back, and then adds the duty of publishing online. So to give you an example, if you go to page 2 of the bill, what this amendment would say, the governing body of any city or town shall designate a legal newspaper and it would reinsert that stricken language, publish once therein the minutes of all regular and special meetings of the governing body and the titles of all ordinance passed. Then it imposes the same concept that the Corporations Committee worked on. And you'll see that on the amendment. Then it would add the requirement that the governing body of any city or town shall within 12 days after any regular or special meeting of the governing body of the city or town, post and maintain on its official website the minutes of all regular and special meetings of all governing body and titles of all ordinance passed. So as you go through the bill, you're going to see a lot of that kind of conforming language. It requires both publishing in a newspaper that the town has designated or the county and maintaining that information on their website. And as I think about who's consuming this information, when I look for information about actions that my town and county are doing, I don't spend the time to go to the public library and look for back issues of my newspaper. I usually go to the governing body's website and try and find that online. And so I think we need to be recognizing that that's kind of a practice I think that's out there. And so this affords both opportunities for publishing with a hard copy newspaper and maintaining on the website. So rather than going through the rest of the amendment, Mr. President, that's what this amendment does. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We are on first reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 17. Discussion and questions for the sponsor. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, could she reiterate the difference between this amendment and what exactly what we're doing now? What's the difference? Thank you.
Let's collect a few more. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think maybe I can assist with answering that question. I think what we're doing now is we're maintaining the requirement to keep the status quo, where cities, counties, and school districts still must publish in the local newspapers. And we're adding a new requirement to also require them to publish on their websites. So I appreciate the effort to start walking the local newspapers down the path of recognizing that this information is available online. When the purpose and motivation of this bill was to eliminate costs associated with all of these government entities for the publication of these government materials, this is certainly not supporting that effort and probably adding additional costs associated with their burdens. But again, if this starts us walking down the pathway to ultimately get us to where I think we need to be with eliminating some of these unfunded mandates and allowing these local communities to determine where they should publish those records and recognizing that our communities are pretty savvy and all of them really have access to the internet. And we're working very hard to make sure that they do that. And that really is where most people go to get some of that information. You know, I'm neutral on the amendment, but I do think when it comes to the purpose of it, of costs, we might be adding a little bit more to the burden.
We have Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. President. Instead of using public funds to subsidize private sector, if people are so interested in getting this information, why not just do a public record request and save thousands of dollars? Thank you.
Further discussion, we are on first reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 17. Oh, there we are. Oh, let me get everybody lined up here. Senator Salazar, then we'll go back in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I would just like some clarification. I'll give you an example. Again, I bring up my little newspaper in Du Bois that publishes once a week, does not have a website. How would this amendment then affect that scenario? Thank you.
Thank you. We had Senator Cost. Then we're gonna go back to, well, Senator Boner beat you up. So Senator Cost, you got to stand down.
Thank you, Mr. President. And back on the amendment, I appreciate the effort. I think it's a good step forward. The one element I would raise is, potentially it'd be a friendly amendment later, maybe exempting some of our smaller municipalities who actually don't have a robust website. And I represent towns like, say, Hartville, and they do in fact have a website just verified, but there's not much on it. I could think of a municipality just down the road from where I grew up in Lost Springs, population 4. So hopefully that would be an opportunity to further work this issue. I think it's a good step forward, as two of my colleagues from Laramie County have pointed out, to kind of bridge the gap of where we're going and make sure all of our citizens have access to this very important information. But I do have some mild concerns about some of our very small municipalities. That it's not going to prevent me from supporting this amendment, but I just hope that we can work together to find some solution there.
Back to you, Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to jump up a little quicker next time. I would like to commend the bringer of the amendment. I think this is a good step towards trying to help move things the way we need to move them, but at the same time, trying to be understanding of those who do still appreciate the newspaper and would like that. I've been going through looking at different small towns, trying to see how many we really have that do not have a website. And so far, I haven't found any, but I haven't exhausted that search yet. So I'm not going to say there aren't, because I'm sure there could be. But at this time, I would say we do need to be understanding of that. I think that making sure that if they have a website, they're posting those out there is important, so that we can start that move. But at the same time, I feel it's very important for us to continue to have the newspaper for those people that do rely on it and slowly make that shift. There is a possibility maybe we could even consider a sunset when all of us older people are no longer worried about the newspaper. So thank you very much.
Let's go back to Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I've got a question on this amendment and background, Mr. President. This bill started as a Corporations Committee initiative. We got to thinking, what we're going to be in hard financial times, and it's going to affect all levels of government, not just the state government. It's going to affect the cities and counties, and they're going to be hit pretty hard, Mr. President. And so we said, and our chairman went out and reached out to the Association of Municipalities and to the counties and said, what can we do to remove some of the burdens that the state has placed on you that are expensive, that you can do without? Where can we modify our laws to save some money? And they came back with this idea. This was their notion of how to save money. And that was the purpose of this bill, was to save money in tough times. And my question for the bringer of the amendment is, if we pass this amendment, are we going to be defeating the purpose of the bill?
Or Rothfuss, probably, excuse me, folks, I got a little cleanup on aisle one here going, but we'll get this going. Okay, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good luck with the cleanup. Mr. President, I would like the objective of this amendment to be realized, but I am a little bit concerned with the timing and the level of investigation, level of understanding, because I don't know what level of sophistication all of our municipalities have throughout the state. And I would be concerned that we would actually be adding an additional workload at a revenue constrained time when we're quite honestly trying to do the opposite. And so the idea that we would make it as a requirement for all of our municipalities, as well as the school boards and others on their websites, is getting to the unfunded mandate point, where, to the point of the tall senator from Natrona County, I think with this bill passing with the amendment, it actually costs more, since there has to be an associated administrative expense to just putting something on the web page, even though I realize it's not monumental and it doesn't have to be the world's most sophisticated web page, but somebody is then responsible for going through the minutes, posting them, and doing that work. I think it's contrary to the original intent of the bill. And so I'm going to be against the amendment, even though I support the policy, if that makes sense. I want it to happen. But I don't think it's appropriate for it to happen with this bill as a vehicle without further study, without an understanding of the additional costs and consequences. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President.
Discussion, Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I think this amendment, on and for the amendment, because I think it addresses my biggest concern, and my concern is that this amendment is actually eliminating.
Can't hear him, Mr. President.
Mr. President, on and for the amendment, I think the amendment addresses my concern. I think the bill had age discrimination in there for those of us older folks that still like to read the newspaper. So I think it alleviates that concern that I had with the bill.
Further discussion, Senator French.
Yes, what if that amendment said either or? Then that puts it back to the communities, the local cities, towns, counties, school districts, everything. The people in those communities can have a direct impact on what their county commissioners may decide. They can say, hey, we're good with it being in the paper, or we want it just in your website, that town, name your town, since I'm in the northern part. Powell, they say, the citizens of Powell say, all right, Powell, we're good with you putting it on your website. We understand the need's not there, or vice versa. We want it in the paper, or do both. So that's just my thoughts, Mr. President.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. To my good colleague to the right, then I believe you should vote against the amendment and for the bill. It does exactly that and gives discretion to school districts, counties, and cities to determine if they can publish online or publish in their local newspapers. They certainly can continue to do that. Again, there's nothing in the bill that precludes or prevents or prohibits them from continuing to publish in their local newspapers. Underscore, bold, all caps. And that's really important to understand. That does not prohibit them from continuing to support their local newspapers. It's just now no longer mandated in recognition of the fact that most of that information is being made publicly available on their websites.
Let's go back to Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some numbers from one of my local newspapers here. Online subscription, 190. In-print subscription, 2,100 plus the copies sold. So in our neighborhood, it's imperative that we keep it going through the newspapers. That's the source of information for this particular county. The next county to the north of me is their numbers on the Southern newspaper are nearly identical. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Others? Senator Cost?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did some checking last night, and local newspaper charges $50 subscription for the year. That's 2 times a week, every month for the year, plus the online subscription. Another in my area, another newspaper charges $35 for both, and another newspaper charges $60 for both. And that's both the paper copy and the online. All you have to do is go online and get it, or get the paper in the mail as well. Internet for 1 month is a lot more than that. So I'm appreciative of the fact that we have the option, and those who want to see it online can. But I also think that it's our duty to make sure transparency is there, and it's important for us to still have that in that newspaper. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? Are you ready for the question on the amendment? Senator Ellis, almost went past you there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks for the questions. There were quite a few, so I apologize if I skip any answers. I'll do my best to get out after all of them. If we don't pass this amendment and we defeat the bill, then this information is required to be published in a newspaper. For a person to access that newspaper, my local paper has a paywall, and if you want a subscription, you have to pay for that. When I think about accessing information and the public's right to it, this information, the information we do in this chamber, the information that happens in your county commission meetings into the town, that is public information. I'm proud of the fact that when people ask me what's happening in the legislature, that I can say, look at our website. You can read about the bills, you can see the amendments, you can see the votes, and you need access to the internet. There's no doubt about that, but that information is provided for free. What happens though with information that's only required to be published in a newspaper is you either have to have a subscription, go to your county library to look for it, or try and contact your local agency or county commission or town council to see what happened. What we're trying to do, senators, is increase, at least my perspective. I understand that this bill was brought as a cost-saving measure for the counties and the towns, but my concern is about the public's right to know what we're doing, and that's at all levels of government. And so the more information and the easier we make it for either folks that are nervous about using a computer, or people that don't want to look at a newspaper or have to have a subscription to a newspaper, they should all have as much access and opportunity for that information. That's what this amendment is trying to get after. So yes, it does swing the purpose of the bill, but there's nothing in the language of the bill that prohibits what we're trying to achieve. I visited last evening with members of our towns and counties, and there's a lot of discussion, and unfortunately, I think our county commissioners, in my discussion, from what I understand, this was an idea brought among many to the corporation's committee of possible cost-saving measures, but it certainly wasn't their #1 priority, if my understanding is correct. And as you can see, we get emails all the time. You didn't receive any information or emails from your county telling you what to do. I don't think this was a bill that they were actively trying to push through the legislature. So I think we need to be recognizing that. And in my conversations with them, I think they know that this would be an additional burden, but one that's probably the right thing to take. And so I am a little frustrated, senators, when we talk about, oh, this is going to be a new burden. Oh, this is going to have new costs. We're already mandating those costs through newspapers. We're already telling our counties and towns, you need to go buy these ads and spend your dollars making sure that this is published in a hard copy newspaper or online. We're already doing that. So when we say, oh, we don't know about the extra burden and work, I'd say that this is, this was discussed. This is a cheaper alternative. So in the scale of things of what we're trying to achieve, at least what I'm trying to achieve is, I think that our counties and cities can do both, because the online is much cheaper to provide than the paper subscription. So if we want to talk about small towns like Hartville, for example, and having them be exempt from the online publishing, why not make them exempt from the newspaper requirement? Right? If we're truly interested about maintaining people's access to information, I think that this is a step forward, not just for the older generation, but for the younger generation that looks online. To my senator, or good colleague here from Fremont County, the question was about, what about a place like Du Bois that only publishes their newspaper once a week? Their newspaper publishing requirements wouldn't change. The newspaper could still publish that on their website for their newspaper, but it would require the city of Du Bois and the county of Fremont to publish it on their official website. So it's a dual requirement. So people have two different places they can look. A suggestion was brought about a sunset. I would reject any efforts to add a sunset at this time. I think that's a question for future legislatures. And this is a time of tough financial hardship, but it's our duty at all levels of government to be very, very transparent with the public. And so that's what the intent of this is. I would urge your strong support. And if we need further clarifying amendments on third reading, please know I'd be happy to work on them. But my concern isn't about cost savings. My concern is about getting information to the public. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, we've had the sponsor speak. So let's proceed. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of first reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 17, say aye. Oh, second reading amendment, sorry. All those in favor of first reading amendment number 1. All those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 17, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no.
No.
Noes were a little louder. Division being called. All those in favor, please stand. Give the chief clerk a chance to count. Those opposed, stand. On the screen. Final count was 10 yes, no 17. Amendment has failed. Senator Case.
President, with respect to a member rising to speak after the sponsor of a amendment has spoken for their second time, that is certainly the custom and the courtesy that we extend in the Senate. It is not our rule. I'm not sure it's amenable to a point of order because it's not actually a rule. And members do have the ability to speak and to speak 2 times on a motion. That's in our rule. It's our courtesy and our tradition, a good one, that we don't force that over the sponsor. I believe that's the way it is. Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Case. Well noted. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. For just a moment, may I have a privilege of the floor?
Please.
The microphone police have contacted me again, and I wanted to share with all of you that there are some concerns out across our state that folks are not hearing us very well. And I would say that in my advanced years, I'm not hearing each of you very well either. So I don't think our microphones and our speakers on our desks are working like they used to. I don't work like I used to either, but I think hopefully we can get that fixed. And I just wanted to remind all of us, let's use our broadcast voices, Mr. President, coming to you from the chamber, the Senate chamber here at the Capitol in Cheyenne, Wyoming. We're in the semifinals. Anyway, speak up, everybody. Grab your microphones a little bit closer, and I think we can help all of our constituents out across the state. Thank you.
Good point. Let's do this. Send a message downstairs. We could send a message downstairs and let's tweak it one more time because we've We are still at point trying to have people across the state here. Senator Rothfuss. Please. Oh, I hit the wrong.
There we
green.
go. Thank you,
I
Mr.
hit the
President.
wrong green. I was trying to help Senator Case say some more.
And on the good senator's point of order, there's no question that he's correct in that it is not against the rules and that everyone's entitled to speak twice. The concern that I have and why I would rise is with regard to tradition and honestly reminding the member that it is the tradition and to contemplate. So while it's in order, my suspicion is that it would be a very rare occasion where anyone would intend to defy the tradition. And I think a reminder is helpful where most of the time that would lead to folks deferring to the final speech by that individual that had the second or that gave their final. And what we've done in the past, Mr. President, as some may not recall, is honestly been the rule and give a third speech, for example, to the original sponsor if they want that opportunity. That's been done in the past as well, which I think is technically out of order. And it's nonetheless been allowed by the chamber. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further discussions before we continue second readings? Continuing with second readings, Senate File 34, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 34, born a live infant, means of care.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think I have a broadcast voice, but I'll try to speak loud. Fellow senators, as you know, we laid this bill back one day because we were working on an amendment, but because of the rigor of yesterday and my schedule, we didn't quite get that completed. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that there could be a third reading amendment. I'm not saying there will for sure, but we're working on something. And if we can come to an agreement, we will have a third reading amendment on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Steinmetz. Any more follow-up? Okay, there are no amendments again at this point. Senate File 34, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. Thank you. We're going to essentially rewind for just a moment to make sure that we put Senate File 17 into the process for third reading. Senate File 17, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. There we go. Took care of the record there. Senate File 70, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 70, fingerprinting fees.
There is an amendment. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 70 and ask for your favorable consideration. Good senators, you recall the robust discussion yesterday regarding fingerprinting fees. And what this amendment does is it strikes the particular dollar requirement or limitation within the bill. It simply says that those agencies are authorized to assess a reasonable fee, period, end of story. And we're not dictating whether it be $5, $10, or any dollar, that they may assess a reasonable fee, recognizing that these agencies responsible for assessing these fees are also elected officials and primary purpose is public service. It also makes the bill, I think, addresses any of those constitutional concerns because we are not doing any revenue issues. It's just simply eliminating the mandate and giving them that authority to assess a small fee if they so choose. Stand for questions and ask for your favorable consideration.
Follow up, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President, for my first time on and for the amendment because I think it makes this constitutional. So honestly, whether or not you like it in the end, I'd urge you all to vote for the amendment to make it a constitutional bill and then decide whether or not you want to support that constitutional bill up or down on third reading. So, Mr. President, on and for.
We are on the amendment for Senate File 70. Further discussion. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got told once that we decide what's constitutional and what's not constitutional by our vote. That having been said, on and against the amendment, I'm not particularly, and I, with all due respect to every law enforcement officer in this state, I am not in favor of leaving an open book to be anyone to charge anything they so desire at any given point in time. I think that's a slippery slope. I think that leaves it open to mischievous behavior and is nonsensical on its face. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let's go Senator Hicks and then Senator Kolb in that order.
Mr. President, I share my concerns from my colleague from Campbell County. The way this is readed, now we've left it up to a reasonable fee. Seems to me that might be unreasonable if the camel gets his nose under the tent because we have no idea who is and who isn't reasonable. And there's a reason that we put limits on people so they can't be unreasonable. So I think the bill is fine the way it is, on and against the amendment and unreasonable people, Mr. President.
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Chairman. On and for the amendment. I think it's clear that we've got 23 different counties with 23 different realities, at least even at that level. Some counties have the ability to do it probably for no cost. Others have to haul a law enforcement officer in to do this and take them off the street. It's clear with all the discussions that I've heard about the differences between the situations that we all have, it seems reasonable to have the officials in that county who are responsible to the voters and held accountable by the voters to make these decisions. I find it strange that we somehow consider them unreasonable because we don't have to tell them what to do. Well, the theory goes, if they're doing the wrong things too many times, they're not there. So I think accountability is in this bill. I think we try to micromanage sometimes, I'll say, with one size fits all. We've just heard a lot of discussions about advertising, and obviously that's not the case. So I think in this particular case, it would be a fair outcome to let the elected officials decide in those districts, counties, cities, whatever it may be, on what these fees they know are reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I just can't believe we're squabbling over this little bit of money. I mean, I got to give you a perspective from somebody who actually has used the system. Called up and had to wait a week to get in there. Other states are charging $25 for the same thing, so I can get it done the same day. I'm just saying that we're not looking at what's really happening here. People need to get their fingerprints, and they need them now today, so they get their application sent off. Like I said, I just can't believe we're squabbling over this.
Further discussion on the amendment? Further discussion on the amendment? All right, we are on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 70. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. No. Noes have it. And with division being called, all those in favor, please stand. Fifteen. All those opposed, please stand. It's time. Fails on a tie vote, 15-15. We're back on the bill. Senate File 70, having been read two separate times. The question is, shall a bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 71, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 71, Strategic Investments and Projects Account Repeal.
There are no amendments. Senate File 71, having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 72, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 72, Financial Counsel and Reporting Budget Reductions.
There are no amendments. Senate File 72, having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. Senate File 89, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 89, Public Utility Safety Lights.
There are no amendments. Senate File 89, having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Bills on third reading and final passage. There is no consent list, so we'll proceed into third readings. Senate File 6, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 6, Public Works Contracting Requirements Amendments, sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, an act relating to public works.
There is an amendment. Reading clerk, read the amendment.
Senate File 6, third reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 2, delete.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask that this bill be laid back. There's a couple other of thoughtful amendments being worked, which we think we'll have ready to go and for tomorrow, if that is acceptable.
Absent objection, Senate File 6 will be laid back until tomorrow. Objection, will proceed then. Bill is laid back. Senate File 6 is laid back for 1 day for the record. Senate File 40, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 40, sponsored by the Minerals Committee, Wyoming Money Transmitters Act amendments, an act relating to trade and commerce.
Are you ready for the question on Senate File 40? Question being called. Senate File 40, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 40, Anderson.
Aye.
Aye. Baldwin. Aye. Beitman. Aye. Boner. Aye. Bouchard. Aye. Case. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. Ellis. Aye. French. Aye. Murphy. Aye. Guru. Aye. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings. Aye. James. Aye. Kinski. Aye. Cole. Aye. Cost. Aye. Landon. Aye. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Perkins. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. Aye. Scott. Aye. Steinmetz. Aye. Wasserberger. Aye. President Dockstader. Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 40, 30 aye.
Senate File 40, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 40 has passed the Senate. Senate File 79, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 79, Medicaid Billing for School-Based Services, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee, an act relating to school finance.
There is an amendment. Reading clerk, read the amendment.
Senate File 79, third reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 5, after.
Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there isn't, this amendment was kind of pointed out by staff and with some alarm from one of the executive branch. Initially, I thought it was just a technical correction. Now I'm not so sure. And so I'd like to make sure that this is this is different, that this memo is a little bit different than the testimony we heard during the bill. And so I need to get to the bottom of this and make sure, track this down and make sure this is the correct thing to do. So I would ask that this request that this be laid back one day to give me a chance to make sure that this is the amendment that we want. Thank you.
Absent an objection, the bill will be laid back one day. For the record, Senate File 79 laid back one day. Senate File 83, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 83, Gillette College Community College District, sponsored by Senator Wasserberger, an act relating to community college districts.
Senator Wasserberger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move first or third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 83 and ask for your favorable support. Members of the Senate, I discussed with you on first reading committee of the whole that I would probably bring a amendment to change the name slightly. Essentially, what we are doing with this amendment on the catch title, we delete community college, and so it would read Gillette College District. Instead of reading using the term college twice in 4 words, we're going to shorten it, and that's what the college is called. It's called Gillette College District. Throughout the bill, we delete community college on page 1, line 2. And then on page 2, line 16, we delete community. And on the next line, page 2, line 17, college. And then again on line 20, we delete community college. So in that paragraph, it would read Gillette College District at line 16 and 17, and Gillette College District at line 20. And then on the amendment that we passed, which creates the Wyoming Community College Commission essentially as the review board for the birth of a new community college between Sheridan College and Gillette. We essentially say on page 1, lines 14, we delete community college, and 16, community college. And so it would read Gillette College District twice in that paragraph. On lines 20 through 30, we delete community college, so it would read Gillette College District twice. At line 25, it says the same thing. And then finally, on line 43, at the very bottom of the amendment, we delete community, and we go over to page 2 and we delete college so that it would read Gillette College District. And so I believe that I have spoken with county commissioners, members of the Gillette College Advisory Board, our vice president. They like the change and it makes it read better. And so I would ask you to vote aye on this amendment.
For the record, would we have the reading clerk read in the amendment, please?
Senate File 83, third reading amendment number 1, page 1 above line 1 in.
Senator Wasserberger stands ready to take your questions. Oh,
Mr. Chairman, I would move.
One more time, please.
I would move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 83.
It's been read in, it's been moved. You've heard the discussion. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, this name change amendment was presented in the committee meeting that considered this bill, and there was no opposition to it. Frankly, the testimony on the bill and the important features in the bill took enough time, we simply didn't get to it, given the constraints of the Zoom format and the rigidities of the time on that, on and for the amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment. Minority Floor Leader Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. One question I had in committee, and I still have, is community college district is sort of the term of art in the legislation and the statutes. And this amendment is fully removing community effectively from every possible instance. I definitely agree with the fact that the name needs to be changed. Because saying college 2 times is awkward. But why wouldn't we be switching it to Gillette Community College District, which seems to be the appropriate parallel formal name that we would use in statute, even if it's not called that. I certainly would not compel anyone in Campbell County to call it Gillette College. They can call it Gillette College or really anything they feel like. But from a statutory standpoint, it seems that the appropriate approach would be parallel language, which would be the Gillette Community College District. So I'd ask that, and honestly, if it's third reading, if we're amenable to that, we could lay it back for an hour and get a corrected copy or something like that. It's not a big deal if we want to change it to that. But I do feel that that's a more appropriate statutory construct. I would prefer that. If nobody else cares, that's probably fine too, Mr. President.
Senator Nethercott?
Thank you, Mr. President. Hearing the discussion, it might be prudent to lay that back. There is no delineation in our statutes for any of the specific community colleges. And so this would be unique and different, and perhaps could add further fear associated with the bill and the concept that something new and different is occurring here when maybe that's not the intention. So I do think it would be unusual to have it stand alone. And I think that the northeast area of the state can feel free to choose to call the college what it wants without that being identified in statute.
We have further discussion before we go back to the sponsor. Further discussion? Senator Wasserberger, do you want to address this and give us some direction?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Actually, this recommendation comes from leadership at the WCCC. So I believe that it's appropriate. And I would ask that we go ahead and vote on the amendment. I don't want to lay the bill back, or and the other part of it is, and we can't really say, but we do have readings in the House if there is an issue and we see that down the road. It's supported locally. It's supported by the commission. And so I think it's an easy fix to do. And I would ask for your favorable vote.
On the amendment, is there a question on the amendment? Question being called. All those in favor of this amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay? No. Close call. Division, anybody want to call division? Division being called. Those in favor, please stand. Those opposed, stand. The amendment has failed. Back on the bill. Are you ready for a question on the bill or for, oh, sorry, President. Didn't see you, Ms. Perkins. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had a lively discussion in committee of the whole about this, and I was concerned, and initially, my vote in committee of the whole was in part because I thought it was inherent that when they voted for when they voted to put in the community college district under the bill, that there would automatically be an assessment of 4 mills, which I think testimony was that would be far and away more than what this new college would need to support itself. And I think that there was some idea of whether or not there would be recapture, and there was this idea of recapture going around. And so with the help of the good senator who's the sponsor, we reached out and contacted the Wyoming Community College Commission and the president there. And I just have some information that I think, just in case you voted based on the fact you might be some recapture and that somehow might help your community college district. I just wanted to come back and do that because I didn't know. And there was some confusion on the floor about that as I circulated and talked to people. So I just thought I had a couple things I'd like to share that I learned from the president of the Community College Commission. And so what it was talking about state funding. And so for the assistance of the community colleges, every community college in the state assesses, prior to this one, assesses 4 mills, most of them 5 mills. And then they receive state aid based upon an allocation. It's different, but it's kind of similar. It's based on average daily attendance and different things like that. And there's money that goes out state aid, and based on that and how your the assessed valuation that your community college district gets on those levies, then that's equalized, and that's how you determine and divide up the state aid. And so the only recapture happens because they have to make an estimate when they make the allocation of what your assessed value is beginning of the year. And then later on in the year, when the actual assessed value is determined, which is usually in July or August of the year, then they come back and there's a little bit of a true up to go back to what your actually assessed value is. And so only the recapture happens is if you receive too much state aid under the estimate of your valuation, you would send the difference back. And that money goes back and then it's reallocated back among the folks that receive state aid. And that's the only recapture. There is nobody all the dollars that are currently assessed and obtained locally for the support of your community colleges stay and are spent locally. It only has to do with equalization of the state aid that comes out that's in excess of what that's done. So the next question came up, which was a question that came up, was asked again by the Wyoming Community College Commission in anticipation of what this was that, and there was 2 questions. There's an Attorney General's opinion from January 26, 2021. So just a little over a month ago. 2 questions were asked. May the trustees of a new community college district levy fewer than 4 mills? And if the new college district is permitted to assess fewer than 4 mills, may it assess fewer than 4 mills until it seeks state funds, then increase its levy to 4 mills and qualify for state funds. Which was right along, I think, what our discussion was. And I won't read the whole thing, but there's 2 short answers. The answer to the first one, which was yes, a community, at least in the Attorney General's mind, yes, a community college district may assess fewer than 4 mills if it is not attempting to qualify for state aid. So ultimately, in the instance of this, just go back to that discussion, Gillette, what's it called now? Anyway, I'm confused. Gillette College Community College, I guess is what it's called now. Gillette College Community College can assess less than 4 mills. It can't receive any state aid, but it can assess whatever it feels is appropriate for it to run that college. So that's the answer to that question. The answer to the second question was yes, a community college district may later raise the standard levy to 4 mills following that process. And once they increase it to that 4 mills and they're assessing those mills, they would be eligible for state aid. And so, going back to the discussion, just to be clear, there will be, that however many mills and whatever collected is in Gillette College, Community College won't have any effect on the state aid or anything else that happens among all the other community colleges. And 2, if the assessed valuation ever goes down in the future, they can assess 4 mills. And if that's still not enough, they can assess, it's still not enough, then they can apply for state aid and receive that state aid like any other community college. So I just got to, because I didn't know and I was confused, and maybe the rest of you had it straight.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Senator Nethercon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question. And a thank you for getting that information. It's very, very helpful. And I understand that comes from the Attorney General's review of the questions. But what is the basis for that decision that if the community college is not assessing a mill, if the district is not assessing a mill of 4, that they're not eligible for state aid? or won't contribute to that formula. Is there something in statute that identifies that or somewhere else? Because I'm not sure of what that authority may be.
Further discussion on the amendment? Senator Scott.
Mr. President, my understanding is that's in statute.
Further discussion, follow-up? Back to you, Senator Wasserberger.
Well, thank you for my first time. And the good appropriations chairman is absolutely correct. That is exactly how it works. But if a community college is to accept state aid, it must levy 4 mills. And so if we should ever have a situation where Gillette College did not cover all the state appropriation, then at that point in time, that new board of trustees would have to levy 4 mills. That's the situation that the community colleges Gillette would face at this point in time. As of right now, it's not necessary. And so literally, I think each year, the community college board would have to assess the amount of mills that it needed to operate. And because of the way our statutes read, actually the changes we made in revenue coming off of property tax, we have a year's wait before that revenue starts showing up. They can say what the mill levy is and then start to collect it, but it would take a year's time for that to show up. And so there'll be a little bit of a delay as Gillette College works through the accreditation. And then once it's accredited, according to the bill, it becomes an independent community college. But until that time, it will be under the direction and control of Northern Wyoming Community College District. And if there's any other questions, I'll try and answer them.
Thank you. Follow up. Let's go back to Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. Just a quick couple of comments. I joined in the effort. Really appreciate the chairman of our Appropriations Committee outlining what we found out, trying to dig down and make sure what was going on financially. Like everything else, it seems to be more complicated than it needs to be, but it might help to understand. And by the way, I don't think that some of the other state sorts of fundings, like Hathaway funds and things, I don't think this comes into play. I mean, that's going to come on down the road, and we may have to cross a bridge, as we grow this thing. But I think it helps to know that state aid comes in different fashions. It's not like a recapture situation, but it is. The assessed valuation in a district does affect how much state funding we send to a particular college. Some are much more supported by state funding than others. That's just the reality. In this case, a good friend from Campbell County has outlined clearly that we're not going to be sending state funding to this college. So thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the chairman of appropriations.
Further discussion on this amendment to Senate File 83? Further discussion? Ready for the question on the amendment? Question being called. All those in, whoa.
It's the bill.
Oh, sorry. Ready for the question on Senate File 83. Senate File 83 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 83, Anderson. Anderson.
Senator Anderson.
Aye.
Anderson, aye. Baldwin. Aye. Beitman. Aye. Boner. Aye. Bouchard. No. Case.
No.
No. Cooper. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. Ellis. No. French. Aye. Murphy. Aye. Guru. Aye. Hicks. No. Hutchings. No. James. No. Kinsky. No. Cole. Aye. Cost. Aye. Landon.
Aye.
Aye. McEwen. No. Nethercott. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Perkins. No. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 83, 20 aye, 10 no.
Senate File 83, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 83 has passed the Senate. Consideration of bills on general file. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we are at that order of business. Consideration of bills on general file.
Mr. President, I move Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Senator Grew, going to lead us today.
The committee of the whole, please come to order. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File number 35. Will the reading clerk please read the Senate file?
Senate File 35, State Budget Department, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee, an act relating to administration of government. Was referred to committee number 2, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Grew, Hicks, Kinski, Perkins, and Steinmetz. Senator Perkins, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Chairman Perkins.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rise to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 35, State Budget Department. And for an explanation of this bill, I ask that you call on Senator Grew. Oh, wait, Senator Grew's in the chair, so I will do his job today. Mr. Chairman, what you have before you is a State Budget Department bill. As you can see, it's a long bill, but it's really not a complicated bill. If you go back to a year ago, we had this debate and we took the budget division and moved it out of A&I at the governor's request on a bill that was sponsored by the good president. And we established the budget department the budget division became the budget department as its own state agency. We didn't increase any employees. We didn't increase any budget, but the governor had wanted to elevate the budget director to basically a cabinet level position and make it independent even of the A&I. So what this bill does, and I'll stand for any questions that you want, but what this bill does is then go back, since we did that a year ago, goes back and finds every statute that refers to the director of the division and turns it to and makes it the department. So what before was the budget division is now the budget department, and the director of the division is now the director of the department. And actually, that's what this bill does. It doesn't expand any authority. It doesn't change any authority. It just goes back and cleans up the statute and the references so that it's properly and correctly referred to throughout statute. And my guess is we've probably missed a few, and we'll be revisiting this for a number of years in the reviser's bill. And so with that, that's my explanation. If you want me to go through it page by page, we can do that and with a break for lunch in between. But with that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for the good chairman? Obviously did a better job than I ever could have done. Seeing no questions. Sensing you're ready to vote. Are you ready for the question? There we go. All those in favor of Chairman Perkins' motion that when the committee of the, or, I'm sorry. Sorry, all those in favor of Chairman Perkins' motion, the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 35, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 23. Will the reading clerk please read the Senate file?
Senate File 23, Public Meetings, Executive Sessions for Security Plans, an act relating to public meetings sponsored by the Judiciary Committee. It was referred to Committee Number 1, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Cole, and Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the due pass recommendation of Senate File 23, Public Records, Security Planning, Executive Sessions. And to present this good little bill, I call on Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have before you a short bill, and it won't take too long, we'll hope. This bill is Public Meetings Executive Session for Security Plans. Currently, in the rules for executive session, there is only one rule for executive session for security, and that's if it's of a national situation. Obviously, with the technology and the other things that are going on in our world today, it's important for our, especially our schools, but our schools and others to be able to properly protect the people they have within. And there are sensitive materials within security talks that need to be in an executive session so that it doesn't reveal any of those particular situations to a condition that may cause harm to the people or the building. In last year's work of this, we passed it through the Senate without any amendments. I got to take that back, except for this single amendment that the newspaper publishers asked for us to please put in to make sure that it was a little clearer. And that part is on page 2, lines 1 through 3. On lines 1 through 3, Romanet, the inserted Romanet is Romanet 12. It says to consider, discuss, and conduct safety and security planning that, if disclosed, would pose a threat to the safety or life, of life or property. And that's all this does, is adds one more step to executive sessions to allow for the security to be discussed in the executive session. There's nothing else in there. With that, I would answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Question being called. No questions. Okay. All those in favor of Senator Nethercott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 23. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. The next bill for your consideration is, let's see.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, don't you need to say that Senate file, whatever it is, has passed the committee of the whole rather than just announcing the vote?
I apologize. Thank you for that correction. Senate File 23 has passed the committee of the whole. The next item for your consideration is Senate File 85. Will the reading clerk please read in the Senate file?
Senate File 85, Property Tax Reporting and Exemption, an act relating to property taxation sponsored by Senator Ellis, was referred to committee number 3, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Baldwin, James, Pappas, and Schuler. No, Senator Case. Senator Case, Chairman.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 85, property tax revisions. Mr. Chairman, there's a standing committee amendment. I would ask that that be read at this time.
Will the chief clerk or reading clerk please read in the amendment?
And may I correct, the name of the bill is property tax reporting and exemption.
Thank you.
Senate File 85, Standing Committee Amendment number 1, page 2, line 19, delete.
Mr. Chairman, I would move standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 85. And I think we could dispose of this real quick. It just changes takes the words actual value and changes it to fair market value to conform with our statute. So if we could just vote on that, and then we could yield to the bill sponsor, which would be Senator Ellis.
Questions? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Case's motion to adopt standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 85, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. The committee of the whole standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. And who seeks recognition? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is kind of revisiting a concept that this body has looked at in the past. But for new members, I want to give you a little bit of history about why we're looking at this particular issue. In 2017, the legislature created the Government Efficiency Commission, who had a contract with a private entity to develop a report containing recommendations on how Wyoming could improve its efficiency and do a better job of collecting existing taxes. Contained in the report was a recommendation to create a better mechanism to encourage accurate reporting of personal property owned and situated in Wyoming. So what is that? 3913-107A Romanet 1 requires county assessors to obtain from property owners a full, complete, and detailed statement of the amount of taxable property each year. And so we know real property is land, personal property is the stuff. There was a lot of concern about this issue going back in prior years about your personal property that you have in your home. Wyoming does not tax items in your home. This deals specifically with the equipment that businesses use to run their business. So how we do that presently is Wyoming is a self-reporting state. And we really rely on taxpayers to know about this tax and to accurately file information about what business property they have. So if the owner fails to provide a list of the property, the assessor shall issue an assessment based on something called best information available. So if the taxpayer is not sure, that the assessor can go in, look at the equipment, and issue the assessment. There are approximately 38,000 tax accounts in the state of Wyoming. Wyoming statute 183205B provides a penalty if you don't report. And if you don't report, you could be convicted of a misdemeanor, subject to a $500 fine, and 90 days imprisonment, or both. So this is a pretty severe consequence if you don't file as a taxpayer. To my knowledge, and during the work of the prior years in the Revenue Committee, to our knowledge, no one has been prosecuted under this statute. And it's actually been a bit of a problem because it's so severe. Assessors and county prosecutors are actually reluctant to use it. So this bill would do two things. I agree that the penalty is severe. So you would see an amendment, or excuse me, an adjustment in that penalty on page 2. And it would say that any person who fails to report taxable property as provided in the statute may be assessed a civil fee, not a misdemeanor, just a fee of $10 for every day the report is not filed, not to exceed $500. Importantly, this says may, because we recognize that there are taxpayers who, and we'll get to this soon, pay very little. And so this gives the assessors the ability to waive the fee entirely or to assess a much smaller amount. It clarifies that the civil fees under this subsection shall be added to the assessment for the taxpayer and can be credited toward the general fund of the county in which makes the collection. Going on to the bill, this bill does one other thing. It creates a de minimis exemption. If a taxpayer has business property worth less than $2,400 fair market value, then he or she would be exempt from reporting. So the term de minimis is Latin. It means about minimal things, and it's used to describe matters that are trivial or too minor to merit consideration. And so as we dug through this issue in the Revenue Committee in prior years when I served on that great entity, I learned about the 38,000 different tax accounts. And you'd be interested to know that on the higher end, 6,000 of those accounts are your large taxpayers. They're paying more than $1,000 each year, and they generate the lion's share of the revenue collected by the state. There's about 134 million collected in this tax. Those 6,000 accounts on the high end generate $129 million. And that's based on 2019 figures. I don't have the 2020 figures in front of me. But if you look at the other end of the spectrum of those taxpayers, of that 38,000, 7,000 of them generate very little revenue, less than $15 per year. And so I emailed you a calculation of based on average statewide mill levy of why I picked $15. But the goal of this bill is to redirect the county assessor's focus on taxes or taxpayers that actually generate revenue for the state. And as I've been drilling through this issue over the years and learning more and more about what's out there, there are about 550 accounts that generate less than $1. In my county, on the low end, we send out tax bills for 7 cents. So when you think about the cost of the assessors needing to keep track of the account, assessing what was reported, buying stamps, paper, printer, we're losing money on some of these accounts. When you talk to your small taxpayers, a lot of them don't even know that they owe this tax. And so what you have is a situation that right now is, I think, inherently unfair because it's for a lot of people, such an insignificant tax, they don't pay it. It's self-reporting, so some people fudge on those numbers, but then you have really honest taxpayers who will report every pair of scissors, every paper clip, everything that they use in their small business. And so as the Revenue Committee looked at this issue in years past, the question is for us as a chamber is, do we spend more time and effort to educate small taxpayers that they need to report and that they really should be putting every paper clip on a piece of paper? Or do we say, that's just not worth our time, we're gonna let it go? And so that's what this bill attempts to do, Mr. Chairman, is it says it's not worth our time, we need to let it go. In visiting with our county assessors, I've been very involved with 3 assessors in particular, and I wanna thank them right now publicly because the assessors from Converse, Park, and Laramie County have spent a lot of time working with me on this bill. And I want to say this does not have widespread consensus among county assessors. There are county assessors who want you to report every paperclip. I think there are other county assessors, though, who say, thank you for doing this. I don't want to keep track of these tiny tax accounts. For my county, we would be hit the hardest, if you want to use that term. We would forego $6,200 in Laramie County, but it would wipe out 1,000 tax accounts from our rolls. And so the purpose of this is really to create an efficiency, and I think it achieves that. And that's why I picked the $2,400 amount, which roughly translates to a $15 annual tax bill. As we've talked about this bill in prior years, there's been concern about the uniformity of assessment requirement in our Constitution. And that's at Article 15, Section 11, which requires that taxpayers be uniformly assessed. And in doing a lot more research this past year, I want to be clear that this complies with that statutory requirement. The requirement is not to collect from everyone equally, it's to assess equally. That's the language of the statute. If you look at case law where this constitutional provision has come into play, there have been instances in Wyoming's tax history where we've treated taxpayers differently, requiring different tax rates of similar taxpayers. So this is a recognition that, so I think this satisfies the constitutional requirement because it's not like we're setting a different tax rate. They're still being taxed at the same rate. Further, something to keep in mind is Article 15, Section 12 gives the legislature broad authority to exempt certain property. And you can see that in our statutes, 3911, 305A, Romanet I through Romanet XLI, that's 41 exemptions. So the de minimis exemption is reasonable. If challenged in court, we would merely need to show a court that we had a rational reason for doing this exemption. And the exemption does make sense. It is a waste of our time to chase after these small taxpayers. To also add to the argument, I also have emailed you a copy of a map that was prepared by an institution that looks at taxes nationwide. And you can see that Wyoming is a bit of an outlier. Most states around us offer this exemption. Some states, particularly to our south, have some reporting requirements because they actually have a much higher level than what this bill offers. For example, some states require 7,000, and that number grows as inflation grows. Other states have about $40,000. And so this is a very modest and minor attempt to start keeping up with our neighboring states that recognize a de minimis exemption. And so that, with Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I just wanted to make sure that you are aware, if you're concerned about how this might impact your county. I did send you an attachment in your email boxes that has a breakout of the statewide averages with the mill levy, as well as a county by county breakout. So you can see how many taxpayers would be relieved from having this reporting requirement. And so in looking at those estimates, and you look at the fiscal note, the impact is very minor. You know, the information I received from the county assessor that I've been working with said statewide, we're going to save about, or excuse me, forego $50,000 or so in revenue. But we've also heard testimony that over the years, county assessor levels of staffing have gone down. And so this is an attempt to say, let's focus those time and effort of those county assessors working in those offices on things that really matter. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions about the bill.
Questions for Senator Ellis? Chairman Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The good senator always does her homework, and it's, incredibly well done, Bill. My concern, and the concern that some of the other assessors have, is that where do you stop? You have to reach out to people. We're really talking about this letter, right? And if you notice, mine's late because I didn't get it open, and how much business personal property you have that you have to fill out this letter, because that's how we assess taxes. And everybody has to do this. Don't like it. Some businesses have a lot of business personal property. Some don't have very much at all, but businesses change over time. And that's, this year I might have something I need to put in this form. Next year, it might be different. But the year after that, I might have a good year, bought a bunch of stuff. It changes. If you drop off of the system, then you have a hard time knowing if it changes. This is kind of rough to collect the business personal property. So, and the amount changes over time. So if you get used to not paying it, not sending in this form, then a couple of years down the road, maybe your amount of business personal property grows past the amount of the exemption. But you're not in contact with the assessor's office. They don't even know you exist, maybe, and you don't pay taxes. Well, that hurts us all. So, we're in the business of trying to get all the taxes we can as we go forward. Granted, this exemption, at least on paper, doesn't cost us a lot of money, but it may lead to businesses that do owe taxes not being in the system down the road. And that's the concern that I have. That's a concern that my assessor has, and other assessors as well. The good senator did a great job on this. I think the assessors came around, and I think they were maybe lukewarm or lukecold, but some of them aren't so hot, I will tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to speak in favor of this bill. It's a friend that we've seen in a prior session, and I'm mystified as to why it didn't pass. The de minimis is important. I think I have an exhibit that was the last time we had this, and it's from one of our counties where we asked for a printout of high to low of all the various taxpayers, and there are people who are having to report on $2 worth of assessed property, $7 worth of assessed property, it's just, there's just the amount of paperwork that goes into this, listing all these values and keeping track of them and reporting them, when in fact, most of the money comes from accounts that are much larger than this de minimis level. And the de minimis is just a reasonable, pro-business sort of friendly approach that says, if you really don't have a lot of business, let's not try and chase them. I get it. It's convenient for the assessors to have people fill out all this paperwork when they have just a few dollars worth of tax liability. But at what cost to the economy? At what cost to the taxpayer? On and for the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else seek? Chairman Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the comments from the revenue chairman because he raises important concerns. The question is, can we do a better job of educating taxpayers on their duty? Yes, we can. What happens when that person crosses that threshold of $2,401? They're supposed to report on their declaration everything that they've got. So, in visiting with the revenue committee, I think that there are some ideas worth exploring. Do we start requiring that when you register your business with the Secretary of State's office as an LLC or some other entity, that you put a disclaimer on there that says, I am aware that I need to declare all my personal property? Sure, that's something that can be worked on. Can we do a better job of asking our chambers of commerce that when you have new members come online to educate them, inform them? Sure, but does that require legislation? No. So there's a lot of things I think we can do to help educate the public, but that's not the scope of this bill. I think that certainly if you're going to involve requirements on a Secretary of State's website form, I would hope that people would give that a closer look. So that's not quite ready for this bill, and it's not the intention of this bill. This bill is simply just a recognition that as a taxpayer, I've got these small bills before, and it is a little infuriating. When you look at getting a $1 tax bill, the cost of your stamp is more than the value of what the bill has in it. And so one question that the county assessors did ask, they said, can't we just do that initial reporting so that they have to at least file that initial declaration? And it pushed against it because we start losing some of the elegance of what this bill's trying to achieve. Because when you file that initial declaration saying, nope, I don't do it, or sending out the postcard to just confirm it every year, someone's got to put a stamp on that. Someone's got to put that card in a file. Someone's got to put that paper and scan it and put it in some kind of file. And so we start losing the beauty of the efficiency that we're trying to achieve. So I did push on the assessors saying, that's not something I support. Certainly anyone could bring an amendment to that effect, but that would be my argument of why not to do it. This is a modest recognition that we need to be more efficient with government. This keeps us up in line with other states. And, to the concern that what happens when you're at $2,400 or $2,401, this bill was purposefully kept low. I guess if an assessor wants to worry about getting the $15.01 tax bill, they can. Right now, they're chasing after those taxpayers anyway. This just actually reduces the number of taxpayers that they're looking at. And please visit with your assessors. They're very candid. They're thorough in their job, and I appreciate that diligence they provide. But testimony that we've heard in conversations I've had is they look at social media and hawk social media pages to see if a new business is coming online in your community. They go to your chamber lunches to see what businesses are joining. They look at the magnets they see outside their window when cars drive by advertising new businesses. This is work they're already doing. What we're trying to do is say, I think that's kind of ingrained in these assessors' DNA, which is great. But it's trying to give them a reprieve of, do you need to track down every dollar, every paperclip, and every penny that's out there? And it's just not worth our time, Mr. Chairman. So I'd urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Further questions? Are you ready for the question? Since you are. All those in favor of Senator Casey's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a favorable recommendation that Senate File 85 do pass. If those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Senate File 85 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 47.
Senate File 47, Clinical Laboratory Regulation Direct to Consumer Exception, sponsored by Senator Case, an act relating to professions and occupations, was referred to committee number 10, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Baldwin, Bouchard, Furphy, Hutchings, and McEwen. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
And there is an amendment. Chairman Baldwin.
Or to do so with the recommendation that Senate File 47 do pass. There is an amendment. I would ask the reading clerk to read it in.
Senate File 47, Standing Committee Amendment number 1, page 1 above line 1 in.
I move Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 47 for explanation of the amendment and the bill. I would turn time over to my friend from Fremont County with a similar haircut, Senator Case.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It is the haircut lobby here, I guess. Mr. Chairman, Senate File 47 is about laboratory tests that you can get that have become very commonplace. For example, you can actually clip out something in a magazine and they will, or go online, let's go online, click, and they will send you a kit to collect your DNA so that you can learn about your family ancestry. You can learn about your cat's family ancestry, I guess. You can do about anything, Mr. Chairman. So that, believe it or not, that's completely illegal in Wyoming. And Mr. Chairman, home pregnancy tests, they're not permitted. Every laboratory test has to be done under the authorization of a doctor and a prescription. This bill fixes that. And it became very apparent when a new laboratory opened up in my community, and they were offering, in response to the COVID epidemic, they were offering what's called the blood test deal, the one that looks for antigens, Mr. Chairman. So, but in getting their license, it was discovered that they couldn't do one of the things they planned, which was to offer to the public these tests. Well, they got around it because the Department of Health was very good to work with them and decide that they could get a standing order from a physician to help them for 30 days at a time. But here we are, we're trying to fix all this, and there are kind of two areas where it comes about, and that's why we have an amendment. Our first fix wasn't perfect, and the amendment was kind of the second fix. So we might as well just jump in and discuss the amendment in the bill, Mr. Chairman. The bill only dealt with section E of 33-34-107, and that's the one that is a direct-to-consumer test. There are names. There's a number that says it has to do with the number of chromosomes, and then there's a possessive pronoun. Number of chromosomes and a possessive pronoun. You get that test, you find out that your sister was an axe murderer is really what you find out from those tests. But Mr. Chairman, so E says this section shall not apply to a direct-to-consumer test. For the purposes of this section, and naturally I don't have my other page. I thought it printed on both pages. Further defined by the Department of Health, a direct-to-consumer test means that a diagnostic device that is marketed directly to consumers, where the consumer initiates the testing process and collects their own human specimen. That sounds pretty bad, but it really means like when I used to chew Copenhagen, we'd spit in the bar, spit in the beer bottle. It's kind of like that, Mr. Chairman, where the consumer initiates the testing process, collects their own human specimen for the purpose of testing and analysis by a clinical laboratory. That's those kind of tests. Mr. Chairman, that doesn't quite cover it all. So that's where the amendment comes in. And the amendment brings in section A of 33-34-107. And this is the prohibition. It says a clinical laboratory shall examine human specimens. Existing language says only at the request of a licensed physician. Well, we're changing that to be, we're striking the word only and saying at the request of a licensed physician, dentist, or other person authorized by law to use the findings of a laboratory examination, and adding a new sentence that says a clinical laboratory may examine human specimens at the request of any person for the purpose of testing and analysis, and a licensed physician or other authorized person shall not be required to collect the specimens as provided under subsection D of this section. So, Mr. Chairman, it's kind of realizing the way the modern world is now. There's a lot more information available. There's a lot more testing that could be done. You shouldn't have to go to a physician's office and get pay for an office visit, to get a prescription, to go somewhere else to get the test. Just the other day, I had to get on an airplane, and it was the policy that they required a negative test for COVID-19. Now, I could have gone to the route of having to get a prescription and going to get the test, go to the doctor's office to do it. I just went to a laboratory. They gave me the test, they gave me the results, and guess what the results were? It was negative, Mr. Chairman. So hooray, that's the bill.
Questions on the amendment?
That's the amendment, I'm sorry.
I was so excited about the negative test too. Questions on the amendment? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Baldwin's motion to adopt the standing committee amendment to Senate File 47, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the motion has passed. We are back on the bill. Questions on the bill? Question being called. Are you ready for the question? Yes. All those in favor of Chairman Baldwin's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a favorable recommendation that Senate File 47 do pass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Senate File 47 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 25. Would the reading clerk please read in the Senate file?
Senate File 25, Animal Impound Proceedings, Bond and Disposition, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee, an act relating to crimes and offenses. It was referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman.
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the due pass recommendation of Senate File 25. Good senators, you recall that this is the Animal Impound Proceedings Bond and Dispositions Bill that the Joint Agricultural Committee worked over the interim. It was re-referred to the Judiciary Committee to do some touch-ups regarding the process associated with the impounding of animals and the required hearing. If you recall from the testimony at that time, there was concern that when a public entity or law enforcement chooses to seize an animal, particularly if it's associated with that individual's livelihood, that perhaps additional constitutional protections need to be provided. And so, good senators, the Judiciary Committee did provide an amendment to Senate File 25, which is the work that the committee did. And so I'd ask to have that amendment read in, and it's Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 25.
Will the clerk please read in the amendment?
Senate File 25, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 4, line 6, after.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 25 and simply identify for the body that what the amendment does is it requires a hearing to take place when animals are seized that are part of someone's livelihood. So if you go in and you take someone's herd of cattle, that they get a hearing before you can just do that. And so it still allows for the public entity to seize those animals and get them into protective measures or whatever the case may be. But before they are permanently taken, a hearing before a judicial officer is to occur. And so that's really all that I believe needed to take place for to make the bill more constitutional or constitutional in total. And so I would ask for your favorable consideration on this standing committee amendment.
Questions for Senator Nethercott on the amendment? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stand in support of the amendment and the work of our Judiciary Committee. Certainly appreciate the assistance from our #1 committee. It's worked out pretty well. We got a good practical understanding of what the issues were for livestock producers and any owner of animals really in the Ag Committee. And we got some good input for the folks who actually have to do this work in the judicial process in Committee 1. So stand in support of this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, animals that are part of a person's livelihood. We use quite a few dogs in managing our cattle herd, and the dogs are frankly both working dogs and pets. Are they covered by this language? Because they are working dogs, they are part of the livelihood, but they're also pets.
Senator Nethercutt.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My position would be no. I do think that this is a question for the entities on the ground to determine for what type of constitutional protections to afford. But certainly they should err on the side of caution and afford more constitutional protections if there is a doubt. But no, typically I don't think the loss of the dog would result in the loss of livelihood, even though they're part of it. So seizing the dog does not mean the mortgage can't be paid, which is essentially the question.
Further questions? Senator Boder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a good anecdote. I just point out that this is mirrored language of both Title 6 and Title 11. Of course, Title 6 being the criminal statutes, Title 11 being our statutes that deal with livestock. So I agree with the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, that very specific circumstance, the answer would be no. But if somebody makes a living selling, say herding dogs, and that's a part of their business, perhaps it would. So since it is in both titles, that is a possibility. It's not limited only to livestock. It's once again at the discretion of the court.
Further comments, questions? Sensing you're ready to vote. All those in favor of Senator Nethercutt's motion to adopt the Standing Committee Amendment #1 to Senate File 25, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Now we're back on the bill. Senator Nethercutt.
Mr. Chairman, you've heard the testimony on the bill and ask for your favorable consideration and questions. I would defer to the good senator of, or the good chairman of Ag.
Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Nethercutt's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 25, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Ayes have it. Senate File 25 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for your consideration is Senate File 76. Will the reading clerk please read in the Senate file?
Senate File 76, Broadband Development Program Amendments, an act relating to broadband development program, sponsored by Senator Dockstader. Was referred to Committee number 7, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Boner, Driscoll, Nethercutt, and Scott. No Senator Case. Senator Driscoll, Chairman.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of a whole rise to report it, do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 76. And for further explanation, I ask you to call on Senator Dockstader.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate File 76, folks, is a kind of a spinoff of some previous work we've been doing in recent years to improve broadband across the state of Wyoming. We had a committee that was formed, task force, so forth, that came together, and we just took a hard look at the technology across Wyoming. We put together a report working with the governor's office, and that report says access to high quality business and residential broadband is essential to developing, growing, and attracting businesses, improving academic performance, supporting healthcare, promoting innovation and entrepreneurship, attracting investment into the state, educating the workforce of the future, improving our quality of life, and improving Wyoming's position as a global competitor. With that, we went to work on broadband in Wyoming. These recommendations came through in Senate File 100. They included the creation of the Broadband Advisory Council, Broadband Coordinator, and a grant program to facilitate broadband development in Wyoming. Senate File 100 passed. It went on, became Enrolled Act 36, and it included the framework for broadband development grant programs. Appropriation was included, 10 million at the time. The legislation had been worked, included the work of both industry and legislators. We had industry at the table through all those discussions, a lot of meetings held throughout the state, all with the hope that this program would put projects on the ground. Now to date, those projects aren't there necessarily from this. Why? The language in the statute created is likely or was likely too tight. Public-private partnership was sought after by industry to provide broadband service hesitated for a while, but I think at this point we're coming together. So we came back and says, we've got to redo this legislation. And so the Management Council created the Broadband Task Force to examine ways to move the needle on broadband infrastructure, appointed a chairman for the task force, a good majority floor leader from another part of this building. Part of the study, the task force worked with the industry to provide updates to the broadband program that it created in 2018. Senate File 76 as a result of all this work, worked through the interim, a lot of meetings, worked with industry again. Senate File 76 creates a process to fund middle mile projects, update speed requirements, allow state agencies to partner on broadband proposals, streamlines the challenge process, eliminates matching requirements, and adjusts the application process. Folks, we've seen the importance of broadband. You've seen as we've held these meetings during this past year, it's worked for some people, others it hasn't. Maybe need to find a way to get some broadband out of Bates Creek, make sure we're connected out there, but that's the case all across the state. Every Christmas, my wife and I have a tradition. We go to the local Baptist church for a Christmas program. And in years past, we've just all attended, and it's been a great program, filled all the way to the back. This year, they said, well, what do we do now with COVID? And we went this year, and the numbers were down quite a bit, but the numbers were big out across the area because they had a camera up there and they were streaming it out there because of broadband. And I thought how fortunate we were to take that program from that wonderful community church and spread it out throughout the region and maybe to friends and neighbors and loved ones all across the country. But how do you do that if you don't have adequate broadband? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take Wyoming up to the next step. And with that, I'll just briefly go over the bill because I see we're bumping up against the 12 noon hour. Page 1, adding confidentiality to the title. Page 2, middle mile project. This may be funded if there is no infrastructure already in place. We have to ensure there is no overbuild with existing infrastructure. Use the broadband funding subject to these conditions. In other words, if they've already got it, we're not going there with this project. More conditions for the middle mile. On page 3, the project has to enable those parties involved to provide access to the last and middle mile. We're going for those certain sections with this. This improves the middle and mile proposal all the way across the state. There has to be arbitration for reasonable rates. If there are two different providers involved and they're making some connections, there has to be some agreements put in place to make sure that that happens. The broadband provider is allowed access. The broadband provider offers lease rate information and reasonable rates to the other party. All confidentiality maintained while they work all this out. Page 4, rulemaking for the middle mile and amending speeds for the last mile, 1 gig to 900 megabit bits. There we go, I can say that. We did this because in some places we couldn't see that full 1 gig, but this is pretty close. Business Council promulgates the rules for the middle mile funding. That's on page 4. Page 5, the wording improvement service districts was added to previous legislation, and definition of state agency was included. This was required when participating in funding the project. Page 6, state agency by itself cannot seek the funding. Private business is required to do that. Also, this opens up working for a business corridor where broadband can take place, setting up a business corridor, improve business. we switched some of the wording around, moved that to page 6. That's kind of technical there. Page 7, these are the definitions of the last mile and the middle mile, and the conforming amendment language is inserted for the middle mile. Page 8 amends the application requirements for project boundaries. Applications can be adapted for current broadband access. As we transition to 9, this is a challenging process for funding decision. This is if you need to challenge it, this is where this comes in. Notice is given to the broadband providers. If one company applies, the business council notifies the providers that there is an application. Page 9, cut the time down from 30 to 10 days to speed up the funding process. Month was considered too long as industry looked at this. Other notes on this page deal with acknowledging any previous funding. If they've got funding already for any type of project, they're off the list. Also in this part of the bill, the broadband provider provides the mapping and the challenging information. That's all handled again in 10 days. Also amended in order to include the consideration of other previous state and federal funding proposals. Page 10 gives direction if the council denies funding to an applicant because of a challenge, the provider does not complete the project, then what they have to do, for example, if they back off and they don't get the project done, they've been approved for it, there's been money allotted or considered, then they may not be considered for another project for another 5 years. Also on page 10, conforming language. These are provisions addressing the projects on page 11. Wyoming Business Council promulgation of rules also on page 11. The repealers, 9/12/1503, the applicant does not contact the providers. Now the Business Council does the notifications. Other repealers, 9/12/1506A, funding limitations. They went from 10% local match, 15 grand. And now if they have a good project, they can just simply be approved for that funding. And then the repealers, 9/12/1508. That's because this is language regarding broadband, changing the broadband from 1 gig to 9. The committee of the whole report, if I go over those real quick, I'm not sure if the floor leader moved those. I'll just say the committee of the whole report addresses statutory citation and technical errors. The standing committee amendment ensures the appropriate broadband information is confidential. Apparently there are some trade secrets in regards to process and equipment. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd move first the committee of the whole amendment to Senate File 76. Ask for your favorable approval.
Mr. President, I think it's in order to move the standing committee amendment first,
Okay.
and then we'll deal with the committee of the whole amendment, if that's okay
Thank
with you.
Yes. Standing committee amendment number 1 to 76, explained what that does. Does the protection of the trade secrets. Ask for your favorable approval.
Sorry, it has not been moved. So did I hear you say you?
So I move that, yes.
It needs to be read in, yes. Thank you.
Senate File 76, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 7, after.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Ask for favorable approval. It's all part of what we've done with 76 to get it ready for the floor. Question.
One moment. The chairman has to move the standing committee amendment. So if I could ask the chairman to move that for me. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 76. Further explanation has to call on Senator Dockstader.
Any questions? Calling for the question. Okay. All those in favor of Senator Driscoll's motion to adopt the standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 76, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Committee of the whole amendment number 1 has been adopted, or standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. Now, committee of the whole amendment, will the reading clerk please read in the standing for the committee of the whole amendment?
Senate File 76, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 4, line 6, after.
That's addressing the statutory citation technical corrections that they made. Ask for your favorable approval. Call for the question.
Question having been called. All those in favor of Senator Dockstadter's no, so I'm sorry, Senator Driscoll's amendments, Committee of the Whole Amendment. Oh. Up Senator Dockstetter's Committee of the Whole Amendment, number 1 to Senate File 76. Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. We're back on the bill.
Thank you. Well, appreciate that. We needed to get those taken care of. Appreciate the body's consideration. Folks, this is a lot of work, 2 different bills, working the interim, a lot of different meetings, a lot of meetings with the industry providers, all designed to, as I take you back to those opening statements, growing and attracting business, improving academic and performance. I'm excited what this could do for schools across the state as we have to reconsider maybe brick and mortar options and making sure we get good teachers in small schools all across the state. We use this internet to do that, supporting healthcare. I know many of our hospitals, mine is out there using it to some extent. We could use some improvements in some area, promoting innovation and entrepreneurship. We've got people, folks, in my area, because of this unique year we've had, they packed up looking for a conservative place to raise their family, packed up and moved into our valley from faraway states out on the coast. And they love where they live. They love the lifestyle. And one of the key things that made it possible for them was high-speed internet. Now, we're very fortunate. We got a unique situation in our area. We have a local provider, locally owned, and they've run a blowtorch to both ends of my valley. And it has made an extreme difference in what we do. We have this family that's moved in. They said, can we raise cows and sheep in our land? Yeah, you can. There's nobody going to stop you from doing that. And this father in this family works all day on the internet in a separate office from the house, raises his family a good place, and gives them a chance to live in a different place. We've got a guy that works for a major company out in the Pacific Northwest city. Major, I mean, you'd know it if you're, and he checks in every day. He flies to a certain Pacific Northwest city once a month, but he can live where he lives because of high-speed internet. We're fortunate because we have a company that does that. In his meetings, he'll talk to them on the city and he said, let me just show you my backyard. And he shows them the Bridger Teton National Forest. And that's the difference high-speed internet is making. It's changing business. I've seen it in our area. It's changing education, what we bring to people. It's just opening the door for a lot. And with that, we're trying to get it all done with Senate File 76. Ask for your approval. A lot of work's gone into it.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I know we're running out of time, and I know how much we support our president, but I just wanted to rise in support of the legislation. I spent the past 12 months with the president serving on our broadband task force. I learned a great deal. We spent hours and hours working with industry and state agencies and all the way across the board. You've heard about our efforts to make YDOT towers available out there. This public-private partnership effort, I think, is one of the best things that we've undertaken in our state. The president's right. We need to get out there with this fiber and with this middle mile stuff and all the way to home base. And so I hope you'll support the bill. I think it's pretty all encompassing, but it's representative of far more than just 2 of our legislators. It goes back 12 months on a couple of committees, and I commend the president. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions, and believe me, nobody supports this effort more than I do. I'm just worried, honestly, that we're potentially underplaying it in some areas. And so I have a couple of questions on the thought process that went into some changes and some new language. The first question I have is bottom of page 4, where we're amending some previous language, where the previous language required gigabit down and 100 megabit up as being the standard that we want built to for these projects. And we're lowering that seemingly to 900 megabit down and 35 megabit up for the target for business corridors. This is specific to business corridors. The 325 or the 25.3 for residential is apparently unchanged for this. So I would ask why the decision to degrade those very high standards when we know that business really has expected gigabit honestly, gosh, it seems like we're getting towards a decade now that some of our highest tech centers have had gigabit down, and we're now still aspiring theoretically with this change to only 900 megabits. So explanation for why that would be the aspiration point. The other question I have is on the new section. So this is going back, beginning on page 2, where we have middle mile broadband projects. We're expanding into middle mile. It makes perfect sense. I appreciate expanding into this area, and I think that will be a helpful tool for the efforts to improve our overall broadband structure. But this language looks potentially overly restrictive that we see in the Romanettes for the conditions in which you could enter into a middle mile broadband project. And specifically what I'm seeing is Romanet 1, where there is no middle mile infrastructure or functional equivalent in the proposed geographic broadband service area to be served. That's a strong phrase. No middle mile infrastructure or functional equivalent. I would ask what the discussion was behind that. The others are a little less restrictive and kind of talk about some aspirations. But it seems to me that you could have a circumstance where an actor that might want to crowd out other actors could just build a relatively small amount of middle mile infrastructure into a service area, and they would effectively be able to monopolize that service area by precluding additional grants into that space and providing any competition. We actually see that, and in conversations I had with the FCC within the last year, there were circumstances where you did have crowd out attempts where infrastructure claims were staked in an area to preclude federal grants to competing entities due to language explicitly like this. So, Mr. Chairman, those are my 2 question areas, the discussion on each of those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Anyone want to take on those questions?
Gather
Good
up any
president.
more. Thank you. I can, to some extent, want to see if you want to gather up any more. We got it now. There we go. Lunch. Let's have our staff come up and crank this up again, Chief Clerk, the mics one more time. The middle mile, as I understand it, and I'm limited on this, and I'll find out some more information for you. And if you'd like to make it less restrictive, they wanted to be careful of what was already out there as far as services being offered. I believe there was one in your area, Senator, that was greatly interested in keeping his access to his customers out there. And I think we need to keep that in mind. So if you have a proposal, we'd open to that. The other on page 4, as far as the 900 and the 1, we were counseling closely with the internet providers that are out there. And they were indicating that is still adequate in many of these places to handle the workload that needs to be done. Will it change in years to come? Maybe. Does everybody have an internet provider that's just there and anxious to provide it for you? I wish you could. I wish you could have the company that we had, that they went for federal grant and then followed up with some of the CARES money. And we were throwing dirt and orange tubing all the way up till Christmas, right? You see those public notices, do not dig after that. They forgot that. They were installing high-speed internet as fast as they could go. I wish you could all have that. This is what we're trying to do, is to get that. But it's my understanding that this was still adequate to do the job, those numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the numbers, though, there has to be some motivation to have lowered them. I mean, we had 1 gigabit and 100 megabit, and I'd like to understand the discussion that motivated decreasing our aspiration points for being eligible for projects under our broadband solution. Because honestly, the previous numbers still are not industry leading. They're decent. So the idea that we would lower from decent, and I'm not saying they're bad, they're sufficient to do a lot, but again, other communities are evolving by an order of magnitude past these. So I'm curious why we would be rolling back at a time when others are moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rothfus. Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the testimony was that the speeds that are specified relate to the maximum speeds that are obtainable with cable television technology, and that's their best offer. I think that was, and that's what they asked us to do, was to put it in at that. And that was the way the bill came. And it's pretty good speed, believe me, but it's not, it's just below the, it's 0.999. So that's the reason for that change. That's why it was in the bill. We probably can discuss that more, but.
Thanks, Senator Case. Further questions? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Driscoll's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 76, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Senate File 76 has passed the committee of the whole. Mr. Majority, sorry. Senator Pappas.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman. During the last debate of the last bill, one thing came up that I'm a little confused on. Maybe you can help me. And it was when the decision that the chairman of the committee had to move the standing committee amendment. I know in the past, especially when chairmen haven't been on the floor and other people have introduced the bill and moved amendments, they certainly weren't the chair. Is that a rule? Can someone edify me? Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, on that point, is the custom for the chair of the committee to make the motion, but on occasion that the chair is absent or some other thing occurs, it's more convenient for somebody else to do it. And there's no rule. It's strictly a custom. It's a good custom, but it is strictly custom, and circumstances can and do arise where it's appropriate for somebody else to make the motion.
Senator Office, point of order.
One more try, Mr. Chairman. Now it's up. Now it's on. On.
Try it. Stop.
Mr. Chairman, on that point of order, I think it's important to realize that really the reason that it was unwound was not because of who made the motion. It was because the motion on the standing committee amendment was made before it was read in. So that was why it was unwound. But because standard practice is that the movant on a standing committee amendment is the chair of the committee, that was why it was then referred to the good chairman. But it is in order for anyone to make a standing committee amendment, although sometimes it can be awkward. You might not even agree with it. So it's definitely preferred to have the chair of the committee make that motion and then advocate for it and explain it, since technically it's the committee that's responsible for that amendment as opposed to some other member. So that's why it went that way, and that's why that's the standard. Thank you.
Gee, and I thought we were just playing stump the chump. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee of the whole beg to leave, rise and sit again.
Please let us leave.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Senator Case.
Call for the question.
All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
All right. Let's go ahead and go to announcements. So you've heard the motion, but we'll wait for just a moment. Announcements. Senator Case and Senator Boner.
Mr. President, your committee number 3, revenue, will meet 15 minutes after we get out of here. We're going to hear Senate File 69, ad valorem tax administration, Senate File 97, state employee longevity pay prospective repeal, Senate File 134, lodging tax exemption for residents, Senate File 150, death penalty repeal, and if time permits, Senate File 92. We're meeting in capital extension number 6, W6, and we're also meeting online. We will continue this meeting upon adjournment today, and we'd ask that you let the committee members slip ahead and lunch because we're going to eat more. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Boner, Senator Landon.
Mike, thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 5, agriculture, will meet upon adjournment in capital extension room W2 and online to consider Senate File 135, water rights, livestock on federal land, and Senate File 157, property rights, limitation on local authority.
Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. Your Transportation Committee will meet 5 minutes ago in room 4 downstairs in the Capitol Extension. Confirmation interviews with Susan Holmes and Mark Hughes, nominees to the Transportation Commission. So we'll be in W4, Mr. President.
Senator, do you want to grab some lunch on the way? Are you one of those two up front of the line?
Well, we might have to strap in and gear up for the rest of the afternoon. Maybe we can set aside a brownie or something, Mr. President.
Further announcements. Mr. Majority Floor Leader and Chairman.
I'll do an announcement and a reading. We will caucus at 2 o'clock when we come back in. So let's make sure everybody's here at 2 and we'll lock her down and do a quick caucus.
Mr. Floor Leader, where do you want to do that caucus?
We've been doing them in here. It's a little hard to do them. We might. No. Okay, let's I think what room we can go to.
We can announce when we
We'll announce the room when we come in.
Okay, when we come back in, double check 110, see if it'll be open.
This will be just a Republican caucus.
Correct, okay.
So, Mr. President, I move that we stand recessed until 2 p.m.
All right. All right, well, and then you've heard the motion. Are there all those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Recessed until 2 o'clock, 2 p.m.